If you have kids counting down the days to summer, that means that their teachers are too, and it is time for teacher appreciation gifts. I know when my son was in school, that used to sneak up on me, and for that reason, I have put together 12 full tutorials in this video, and each of them can be sewn together in 15 to 30 minutes or less. How awesome is that? And these are things that I think the teachers are going to love. Because this video is a little bit long, be sure to look at the description where it will show you each of the projects and give you a timestamp so you can jump right to whatever you want to try first. Be sure to leave me a comment. I would love to know which ones of these resonate with you, what the teachers across the country and around the world will be getting, and happy sewing. In this video, I'm going to show you how to make a lavender eye pillow that has a removable case. So it is going to be made out of two pieces. One will be the inner bag that has the lavender and the flaxseed, rice, whatever you decide to put in there. And then a separate cover that has this little flap where you're just going to open that and you're going to put this little bag in here. That way, if you're using it and you get makeup on it or you feel like you just want to clean it, you can just pull that bag back out. You can wash the exterior cover, and then you can insert the filling bag right back in there. Then you just fold that over, move that around a little bit to get it all organized, and it is ready to go. I also have a tutorial for how to make a lavender eye pillow that is shaped like an eye mask, but this one isn't washable because it is just the one layer of fabric with everything sewn in there. I was actually surprised to learn that the ones with the removable cover were a little bit faster to make than this one, even though it is 2 layers. And that is because it is all straight cutting and all straight stitching. There's no using a template to cut out the shape. There's no sewing on a curve, clipping the curve, folding this under. This is just a little bit more work. I thought this might be a little faster because it was 1 layer, but this ended up being faster. You're going to be able to whip these up in probably 10 to 15 minutes or less once you get going. They're going to make great gifts, great things to sew and sell, great things to make the cover for our lavender eye pillow. You're going to need the piece of fabric 20 inches wide by 5 inches high. And if you're using directional fabric, you want to make sure the direction is kind of going the short way and not going this way. The first thing we are going to do is we are going to put it right side down, and we are going to press a 1/4 inch in on both of these ends. I'm just going to kind of eyeball it. I'm going to fold it and fold it again, hold that down, and then press that. I'm going to use my handy dandy clapper to get the heat out and really set that press. And now we're going to do the same thing on the other edge. And what this does is it encapsulates those raw edges on what will be the flap and where you're inserting the bag with the lavender, flaxseed, rice, whatever you decide to put in there. Because I'm starting off the end of the fabric and the front of the bag is going to actually be where the bobbin thread is, we want to make sure we don't get any of those nasty knots that sometimes happens when you're starting to sew. So I'm going to use a leader fabric, which is just a messy piece of fabric, which you can tell I've been using quite a bit. Just a scrap piece. I'm going to put it behind my project fabric and make sure it covers those feed dogs completely. Put my foot down, and I'm just going to start sewing on the leader fabric. Then if anything goes weird and you get one of those bird's nests, it doesn't matter because it isn't going to be on your project. So I'm just going to start. Then when I get on my project, I'm going to take a few stitches back to knot that. Now I'm going to a few stitches back. And because this piece is 20 inches long, I can just flip it and get to the other end while that is still there. So I'm kind of daisy chaining both ends of the fabric just to be more efficient. Uses less thread, don't have to do the leader fabric again. Now we have those ends secured. Up on your ironing station, I'm going to fold one side back 1.5 inches. Now, the easiest way is to just use a ruler that you already have. Kind of guess, fold it, and then come back and measure and see if you're about 1.5 inches. I've overshot a little bit. I'm going to move that. I had 1.5 inches. Okay, so that's 1.5 inches. So that's one way. But I also want to tell you about this. If you've never seen a hot ruler before, it's pretty cool. So it's flexible. It feels kind of fuzzy. It has all the measurements on it, and you can iron right on it. So the beauty of this for projects like this, or even when you're doing a long, like folding over 1/2 inch all along something really long, is you can put this down and you can push your fabric up against it so you know it's going to fold straight. And then you just keep adjusting it until the edge of the fabric is where you want it to be. So we want this at 1.5. So we're on that 1.5 line. To make sure that's nice and tight. And then I can just take my iron and go right over top of that. Love it. Now, because there is a little thickness to the ruler, your crease isn't going to be as tight as if you're just ironing fabric to fabric. So if you want to, you can just go over it again like that. Next, we're going to bring the other edge over, and it's going to overlap this flap. That's going to be the flap to help you put the insides in. This is going to be our washable cover. And you want this to be about 1/2 inch from that edge. Don't need a hot ruler for that. I would use something clear so you can line up that 1/2 inch mark right on the folded edge there. Now I'm going to bring this up. Okay, it's butted up. That's 1/2 inch. Make sure these raw edges are all lined up straight and then press that. Now I'm just going to clip that together. You can clip or pin, obviously, your preference. And we are going to sew down each side. Now I'm going to grab my leader fabric again, because even though it will be on the inside, I still don't want a bird's nest on my project. And I'm going to sew straight 1/4 inch from the raw edges. Now I can feel with my finger that I am reaching this point where this first one was folded. So it's like right here. So I'm going to go forward, back, forward on this whole section so that I'm doubling up, sewing this and this underneath part. Okay, now we're going to do the same thing on the other side. Now, because I'm sure you're hoping that this is going to be loved and used since you're taking the time to make it, you're going to want to make sure that this isn't going to fray a ton on the inside as it goes in and out of the wash. So there are a few ways to go. If you have a serger, you can just, instead of sewing straight, you could have just serged that edge. If you don't have a serger and you want to sew, you can change your foot, do a zigzag stitch, making sure you stay to the side of this. Or you can do a stitch that includes a straight line and the zigzag in the beginning. I obviously chose not to do that, just wanted to keep my same foot on there, so I sewed straight. So we're going to go back to the workstation. I'm going to show you how I am going to prevent this from fraying. So if you don't serge or zigzag the edge or do something else to prevent this nonsense going on, you're going to want to cut it either with pinking shears or with a wavy rotary cutter. So I'm going to show you both. With pinking shears, I always like to do them right over top of a trash can. And I love these from Fiskars. It's really easy on your hand. It's not as hard on your thumb as many others are. So I'm just going to very carefully go all the way up that edge, making sure that I do not cut any of the stitching. And by adding this pinked triangle thing, you're not going to have long pieces of thread unraveling when this is in use. So pinking shears are a great way to not only clip curves, but also make sure things aren't going to fray when you just want it to be quick. Now, if you're into having multiple rotary cutters like I am, I have this one that always just has a wavy blade. You do need to change this a little bit more frequently. It's not as forgiving as a straight blade because if it isn't cutting really well, it's hard to fix that on your own. So this is a pretty new blade. I'm going to put my ruler down and make sure that stitch line is on the inside of the ruler because again, we do not want to cut our stitches. I'm going to hold my hand flat and then I'm just going to cut all along the edge. And I really had to do some pressure at the top because remember, we're going through 3 to 4 layers up there. So if you're cutting straight things, it is way faster to use a wavy rotary blade if you have or want to invest in one of those. If you don't have that and you have pinking shears, that works great too. Then the cover is done. All you need to do is turn it right side out, push out those corners, and you can just use your finger, you can use a turning tool, use a chopstick, use whatever you want. And then you're going to flip this flap over, push out those corners, and you'll see that that overlaps an inch. And that makes it easy to then slide in our encasing that has the beautiful lavender, flaxseed, rice, buckwheat, whatever you want to put in there. And it is ready to go. And then when somebody's been using it a bit or, get makeup on it or whatever, they can just take that inside out, throw this in the wash. And I'm going going to use this bee fabric for my inner fabric. So the fabric that the lavender and I'm going to use flaxseed are going to go in. Often we think about using white or muslin or just something basic as an inside like that. But if you have fabric scraps and if your fabric isn't going to show through when you put the cover on, you can use any fabric scrap that you want. So I'm going to use this leader fabric again, just to get that started. I'm matching the two long sides of this 9-inch square, and we're going to sew all the way down and across the bottom using a short stitch length, because if you're putting small seeds and things in there, you don't want them to fall out. So I am using a 2.0 stitch length. And because we're going to have small pieces in here, you want to make sure you get all the way to the edge, if not even one stitch over the edge, so that nothing is going to fall out of that little spot at the end. Now that we have sewn down the one side and across the bottom for the lining that we're going to put our lavender and flaxseed or whatever else in there, we're going to cut the corners. And I like to trim twice, just going a bit longer so there's not as much fabric that fits in there. And then over here, I'm just going to trim a little bit, just making sure you're not going to cut any of your stitches or get too close to that edge. Now I'm just going to turn this right side out, push these corners out at the bottom. I'm going to just kind of roll that to make sure that seam is right on that edge. And if these points aren't out perfectly, it doesn't matter, because again, this is the lining. It's going to go inside the cover. This is what is going to hold our material so that we have a removable cover that we can then take off and wash if we want to. Some people would then say, okay, put all your stuff in there, but I have a different way of doing it because I think this is faster and easier. I always like to fold the raw edges under and press them before I put anything in there. So whether I'm making a rice heating pad, a flaxseed pad, or these little lavender pillows or sachet, anything like this, I always do this now because see, I'm just ironing it when it's flat. There's no stuff in here. Nothing's going to fall out by mistake. So get it prepared like that before you put your material in there. Now we need to get the pretty smelling lavender buds and whatever filler you want to put into the bag. I'm using flaxseed. It heats up nicely if you want to have a warm compress on your face or your forehead. You can also put it in the freezer and it will make a nice cold compress. I like to just make a funnel out of a piece of paper. And I like it to be a little bit shorter than, like a little bit smaller than the width of my bag. So I usually do that, like I'll fold it like that. And then before I tape it, I will make sure it's going to work. So I'm going to open that up. All right, it's taking a little too long to get in there, so I'm going to make it a little bit snugger than that, because I just want to be able to put this in, get the stuffing in there, and get out. And then you can always save this for future. Just write on it, Lavender Eye Pillow, reusable cover. So I have the cone. I'm going to put that right in there. And then I'm just going to pour right in the top. Well, make sure that's not too flat. You want that nice and open. And I like to do about half a cup of each. I would start with that and then decide what you think. You can either pin or just hold this together, kind of move it around, lay down, put it on your eyes, see what you think. Is it enough? So now that that is done, we're just going to put 2 clips on the top. And we're going to sew that shut with a short stitch length so that none of the lavender is going to come out. Now, when you're sewing with the flaxseed and lavender or whatever you have in here, you want to have that all pushed to the side so it's nice and flat here. We don't want to be sewing over anything weird, and we don't want it escaping while we sew. We're going to start sewing on the leader fabric, then back and forth when we get on here and sew pretty close to the edge just to get this sewn closed. Because these are so quick and easy to make, these would be great for yourself, obviously. For gifts, you could use them for fundraisers. They'd be great teacher appreciation gift, Mother's Day, stocking stuffers, coworker gift. You could use them as a booster project for sporting teams that are trying to raise money for scouts. So I would love for you to leave me a comment. Let me know who you're going to make them for first, how you're going to be using them. If you sell them, let me know how they do. Let me know how much you're getting for them. I love to know all the details. This is a mug. This is a coaster. A coaster is the perfect size for a mug. This is a mug rug, basically the same size as the coaster, but wider, shaped like a rug, hence the name. Mug rugs can come in any size you want. There are no mug rug police. This one is 4.5 by 7 inches. This one is 9 by 6. And this one is even bigger than that, about 9 by 10 or 11 because of the design that I wanted on there. The fastest way to make a mug rug would be to take 2 pieces of fabric, put some fleece or flannel on the inside, sew it together, turn it right side out, and you're done. Look at that. The beauty of a mug rug is there is room for stuff. You could put a cookie there, you could put a little plate with your tea bag, whatever you want, or you can just put the mug in the middle. It's just a different concept, but basically the same as a coaster. I am going to show you how to make this folded mug rug in the same way that I have shown you how to make these coasters. It just is a little bit more interesting to have 4 different fabrics instead of just having something solid. So what do we need to make this mug rug? We need 5 pieces of fabric. So 7.5 by 5 for all of these pieces. Backing fabric, fleece or batting. Then you need 4 pieces the same size for the top. So I'm going to be using the sunflower, the sunflower tosses, and the honeycombs. These are from my Honey Bees and Sunflowers Please fabric collection from Riley Blake Designs. Most of the work is done at the ironing board, so let's head over there. We have our 5 pieces. If you're using fusible fleece, you're just going to fuse that to the back of your back fabric, which is this one, following the manufacturer's instructions, or you can use batting scraps. It's just something to give it a little bit of padding for your mug rug. Now we are going to take these 4 pieces, and because I'm using 2 directional pieces, it is a teeny tiny bit more complicated than if you had all non-directional prints, but I want to show you how to do this, and then anything else will be even easier. So you'll notice on this one, I made sure the stems were going in the same direction and one wasn't upside down. Well, I guess it really wouldn't matter. It would just look good from both sides. But I'm assuming most people are going to look at this from one direction. Different from the coasters, because the coasters are square, you just folded everything in half and pressed it, easy peasy. For the mug rug, because it is a rectangle, we're going to press 2 of the pieces in half by matching the short ends. Do that. I'm just going to give it a little press with my quilter's clapper just to cool that fabric off and press that seam. Okay, so we have those 2. And then these 2 are going to be folded by matching the longer ends. We're making longer, skinnier pieces. Now, if you have a clapper and you're doing a lot of pressing and using the clapper a lot at once, you can turn it over every once in a while, just so the heat goes into the opposite side and not always in one side of the wood. So now we have everything folded in half and pressed. Now, one very important thing to note is that the folded edges all need to be on the inside, and the raw edges all need to be what is going to be in the seam allowance when we sew this together. So you want to move them like that now. This one had the raw edges in, so I have all of the folds facing in. Because these are directional and I want to be a little controlling about what is showing, I'm going to be putting this together, and then we will put the backing on top. So this is going to be the top left. This is going to be the bottom left. So I am just matching the raw edges here and the raw edges here. Next, we're going to put the sunflowers up here. So we're going to match these folds and all these raw edges. The 4th one is the one that's slightly trickier because you have to lift one to weave it, because if we do that, we're not going to see this one at all. So what you do is you fold this one back. You put this one in, making sure again that the fold is going to be in the center. And then you simply fold that back. And just do another double check and make sure all the raw edges are lined up and nothing's, kind of off like that. So that looks good. Doing it this way, putting it together before we put the backing, we know exactly what is going to show when we're done. So now we're going to take our backing and we're going to put it right sides together. So the right side of the backing onto the right side of our folded mug rug fabrics and line up all of those edges. Okay, we're going to flip it. So this is what's going to be on the inside, which would also be pretty on the outside, but sometimes you don't know if you're going to get a good piece or not. Clip or pin, and I make sure that I clip where these folds meet just to keep everything straight and lined up. Now, one thing I love about this project is we're going to sew all the way around. We don't have to leave any space open for turning at all because we are going to be turning through all these folds. Okay, I think that's an adequate amount of clips. We've clipped all of the folded areas. We have it all nice and straight. I usually flip it over again, make sure I have everything caught on the back and I didn't miss any layers. Now we're going to take it to the sewing machine and we're going to sew all the way around with a 1/4 inch seam allowance. You want to make sure that the foot doesn't go up under this fold. So I usually use scissors or a pen or something to hold that down to keep my fingers away from that needle. And as I said, we didn't need to leave anything open for turning. We could just go all the way around and start and stop at the same point. Now we need to clip the corners so that we can get them to turn as well as possible because there are a lot of layers, 2, 4, 5 plus the fusible fleece. And that is a lot of layers in each of those corners. Now you can just clip the corner at a 45-degree angle to there. That is a very traditional way that people do that. But you're then going to have to fold all of that fabric into that little corner. So you're not going to get as good of a corner as if you taper the corner. I remember the term most people use for that. So I'm starting up here and cutting more of an angle. So you'll see more is cut off here than on this side. The main thing is make sure you do not cut your stitching. You also have to go a lot slower and more gently when you're turning this right side out because there's very little beyond that stitching and it will be easier for you to poke whatever you're using to turn out of that stitching or through the fabric. I'm going to trim all 4 corners. Now it is time to turn it right side out. So we have the fleece or batting or whatever you're using for the inside is on the outside right now. This is the inside of the fabric. You're literally just going to put your fingers in the center and you're going to flip each of these corners right side out. But they're still pretty rounded compared to these. So let's do a better job. I'm going to grab my turning tool. This is got a point, but it's not sharp. You could also use the tip of a pen if it's not opened. You could use a chopstick. Anything that's a little bit pointy that's going to get into that corner better than your finger. Now, the main thing to remember is you have to have your turning tool going against your filling. So if I were to try and push this corner out and put my turning tool here between the sunflowers and this fabric, it's not going to turn the whole corner. It's just focusing on these two. I need it in here next to the fleece so that it is actually reaching the 2 top layers and the bottom layer. And then I'm just going to very slowly and gently, and sometimes I'll squeeze it like that. That helps move along that seam and push that out. You can see it's turned better than these other corners. So I'm just going to repeat that on the 3 other corners. Now, when you're happy with that and feel like you've done the best job that you can without pushing through the fabric or the stitching, you're going to lay it flat, just kind of move it, get those seams right on the edge, and then you're going to press. So you can be done. Like this one, I just pressed it and it's done. It's a little bit puffier. So for this one, I'm going to show you what stitching around the edge and even doing diagonal line stitching does to the look of the mug rug. So let's head back to the sewing machine. Now for doing top stitching on a project like this, the thread choice is going to impact how your project looks. If you want all of the thread to kind of disappear and not be a visible element of the design, you would use navy blue and then switch to gold. I don't want to have to switch my thread, so I'm just going to do navy all the way around. Now I'm going to go all the way to the corner because I am going to, for whatever reason, sew a diagonal down my coaster so that it should go right through that center. You can draw the line if you want to. I'm going to wing it and see how I do eyeballing it. Fingers crossed. Phew, I did a good job. I hit the center. Now I'm going to do it in the other direction as well. Now I could, again, change the thread color to gold if I didn't want this stitching to show, but I am just going to leave it with the navy blue. So that's it. Now we have 2 mug rugs. They are exactly the same fabrics, exactly the same size, but they look a little bit different because this one has just been sewn together and left a little bit puffier. And this one I stitched around the edge and then also through the center. If you feel like you're going to be putting these through the wash, I would probably recommend at least stitching the outside, if not doing a little decorative stitching on the inside. If you feel like you don't really dirty your coasters very often and you like this look better, you're totally fine. Mug on the mug rug. It looks good on them both. It's traveling season. And if you are like me and so many other people that I know, you might have a fluorescent neoprene handle to help you try and find your suitcase in the sea of suitcases. Not the most attractive, so let's make something cute in just a few minutes out of fabric that we love. Another reason I love this because it is made out of a square. When you're cutting it, you don't have to pay attention to what direction you're cutting. So if one side's longer than the other, you do have to pay attention to which direction your fabric is going, unless it's on-directional, of course. But this way, you just make your square and then you figure it out later. Here is what you need. 2 pieces of fabric, 5x5, a 5x5 scrap of batting. It could be fusible fleece, it could be quilt batting, whatever you have, and then a 4-inch piece of Velcro. Then I'm also going to use this cute little bird to turn the corners, but that's later. So all we do is we put these right sides together, and if it is directional, make sure you put them in the same direction. And then you're going to put the fleece on top. Now you're going to take this to your sewing machine, you're going to sew all 3 edges and leave an opening here. Now that I have that sewn together, I'm going to clip the corners, making sure not to get the stitching. And then this part is optional, but it does make it a little bit easier. I'm going to put a ruler right below the stitching so that when I do a chalk line, it goes right in line with the stitching. See how that looks like it's the same line? Then I'm going to very carefully take my scissors and just trim out this fleece. It's going to make it a lot easier when we fold it to get that open part folded over correctly without having to fold the fleece as well. Now we're going to turn it right side out. All right, I like to get my corners pushed out as well as I can with my fingers. Then I will use a turning tool. Super cute little Riley Blake bird, love it. And then just very gently push at those corners. If you go too hard or too fast, you might find your turning tool comes through and then you're going to be very sad. Now I'm going to take this to the ironing board and I'm just going to have this folded under, and it's really easy to figure out where to go because I just go right along that fleece. And I'm going to press that, and then I'm going to sew all the way around with about 1/8 of an inch from the edge that will close this opening. So I can decide, do I want this to be the top? Do I want it to be this way, or do I want it to be this way? I mean, it doesn't really matter. Some people will look at it from this direction, but I usually like it to go the direction of like my suitcase. I kind of like that side better. So if I want this to be the top, then I'm going to put the scratchy side here, aka the hooks on this side, and then I'm going to put the loops on this side. So I'm going to go back to the sewing machine, hooks, loops, just like this. Hooks on one side, loops on the other side, so that when you fold them over, they meet and they stay on your suitcase. That's it, it's done. We have the hooks on one side, the loops on the other. So we'll just show you again how I put it on. I'm going to center it, I'm going to put the loops under. Then I'm just going to roll the fabric so that the hook connects and it is on there nice and secure. So whether you're going on vacation by plane, train, automobile, or even on foot, if you have a bag, it needs a tag. So let's get started. First, you're going to need 2 pieces of fabric, one for the outside, one for the inside, 11 inches by 4 inches. Then you're going to need a piece that is 1.5 inches by 11 inches for the loop, then 1.5 inches by 18 inches. That is going to be the part that binds the vinyl to make the little pocket so you can put your information in there. Now let's talk about the clear plastic. I have 3 ideas of how you can make those. This one was actually made by taking a photo size laminating pouch, laminating it with nothing inside, and then cutting it to size. I was able to get 2 pieces, 4 inches by 3 inches, out of the one pouch. In this tutorial, I'm going to try my second idea, which is to use a page protector. Trying to look for ideas that you're going to have around the house. The third idea is if you like to sew with vinyl, maybe you've made some vinyl pouches, you can cut that into the shape as well. Then you're going to need either medium weight interfacing or 2 pieces of lightweight interfacing. Sometimes I feel like one of those shows where they're like, hey, let's just see what you have in your cabinet and we're going to make a meal. That's what I did with this luggage tag. I didn't have medium weight, but I had the easy shaper interfacing. So I simply put it on the back of the exterior and the interior fabrics. And I have already done that. Whatever you use, just follow the manufacturer's instructions. You're going to cut it the same size, 11 by 4. Get that ironed on so you are ready to go. Clips, you're going to want some leader fabrics. It's going to make sewing so much easier. And basically, leader fabrics are just little folded piece of fabric that helps you get everything the same level. I'm also going to be using the quilter's clapper. If you have a bias tape maker, grab the number 18. If you don't, that's totally fine. You can make these pieces with or without it. Then a turning tool. You will also need to know how to make buttonholes on your sewing machine. I'm just going to say make a buttonhole. We're not going to go into how to do it because every single machine is a little bit different. Let's get started. The first thing we're going to do is we are going to take our two pieces. I'm going to put them right sides together, and we are going to cut these corners. And it is basically 1 inch in and 1 inch out. So what I'm doing is I am positioning this on my cutting mat so it is lined up with 1 inch lines. That way, I can just take my ruler and I can line my ruler up at a diagonal from the 1 to the 1 and I can cut. I don't have to measure and mark my fabrics. I can just let the rulers on my cutting mat do the work for me. So now we have two pieces of fabric with the corners. This is going to be my outside, so they'll coordinate when I travel, but not totally match. But they need to match enough that my husband's going to know they go together and that it's definitely my luggage. Makes sense, right? This is going to be the lining. We're going to put the exterior fabric aside for a while. We're going to be working with this one 90% of the time for this project. Now it is time to iron our two strips that are going to become the strap and the binding for the vinyl window. And I'm going to show you how to do it with or without the bias tape maker. And I will have a link below this video. If you have never used a bias tape maker, I have a more in-depth tutorial about how they work and what they do. So I will put that there if this is new to you. So I'm going to turn the shorter one, wrong side up. I'm going to grab my iron. Now I also did starch this fabric before cutting them to size because the starch helps these creases hold better and it also makes it easier to guide it through the bias tape maker. You don't have to, I just prefer to do that. All right, so pass number 1. Now I'm going to open it back up. Wrong side up, and now I need to go through and I need to press both of these raw edges into the center. You don't want to press that crease that we just made flat, so make sure the tip of your iron is staying off of that first fold. So without this bias tape maker, I'm having to press 3 times where I'm only going to have to press once. So this is a very inexpensive tool, very worth having, in my opinion. I use it for a lot of different things. So I would definitely invest in that. And I do have a link if you want to grab one on Amazon below this video. Now our last step to make the strap is we're going to now fold this in half again so that those raw edges get encased in the center. So that is ready to be sewn. Now let us use the bias tape maker. So what this does is it takes this fabric, it goes through here, and it folds it so that the raw edges meet. So we're going to iron once instead of 3 times. So you're just going to push that through. And sometimes it doesn't come all the way out, which is why you want this. There's a little slot there where you can stick that and kind of just nudge it, help it through. I'm going to pull that out the other side. Now, before you go crazy, you want to make sure the fabric is feeding evenly, which it wasn't. So we're going to adjust that so it's going up the sides about the same amount. And then we are also going to make sure that on this side, these edges are meeting. They're not overlapping. There's not more on one side than the other. We want them to be nice and centered. So if you just take a minute to focus on those two things before you get started, this makes this a breeze. Now I'm just going to put the iron on there and start. And I usually just pull back a few inches and press. And you're just going to move until you've done the entire length of the fabric. Look how easy that was. So much faster than doing it in half and then bringing those raw edges into the center. So now I'm just cooling that off because it did get quite hot and folding it and pressing it in half. Now we're ready to head to the machine. Now we are going to take this small piece, which is going to become our strap, and we're just going to sew this open edge closed so that it stays flat and those raw edges stay on the inside. I am going to use a leader fabric. I'm going to butt this right up against there. Then I'm going to put that under the foot and under the needle. And what that does is it keeps everything even. Not that this is that thick, but it is going to help it move more easily. So when we start to sew, the feed dogs have something to grab onto, and it's not just going to get hung up. And because we're not sewing on it, it just pops right out the back, and you can use it over and over again. Then just to keep it straight and not sew my fingers, I usually use scissors when I get towards the end. I'm going to just keep mine like this with it just sewn down the one side. It's so skinny, and it's going to be for a luggage tag, but if you prefer the look, you can go back and sew the other side as well. Totally up to you. The next thing we're going to do is start preparing our vinyl window. We're going to take the 18-inch piece that we folded over, and we are going to bind this fabric just like it's a quilt or a quilted project. I'm going to start on a long side towards the bottom. I'm going to stop when I'm 1/4 inch from the edge of the vinyl, and I'm going to knot my thread. Now, I've seen this done both ways, where you put the binding around the vinyl first, or you put it around when it is on the luggage tag. I've done it both ways, and I've decided I like this way better. Then you have more control about where it is going to be placed on your luggage tag. I did one that was too far to the side, and it was all messed up. So now I'm going to turn this. I'm going to open that up, and I'm going to put the vinyl right along that fold. Fold that down, push this side in, this side down, and you have a cute mitered corner. I'm going to do the same thing on all 4 corners. If you need to hold that corner with your scissors while you get it under the sewing machine, that's fine. And then make sure you're keeping your vinyl right tucked up into that crease. Now I'm just going to get this one started, and then we need to get ready to be at the very end. So it's going to overlap down here. So I'm just going to cut beyond where it overlaps. And then I'm just going to fold that up. I'm going to clip that in place. So now we have a little bound piece of plastic. And now it is time to put it onto the lining of the luggage tag holder. Now we have the page protector rectangle that's going to hold our information all bound, have a little bit of extra. I'm going to throw that away. And then we also have our strap that we sewed shut. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to match those raw edges, and I'm going to clip them here, centered on one end of the lining. Now the next thing we're going to do is we are going to clip the vinyl pouch onto the lining. And I have these cuts lined up against that line again. And we want the edge of the pocket to be about at that line. And you want to make sure there's at least 1/4 inch on either side. So you really want to make sure you have that centered. If you have any of these large fabric clips, I don't use them often, but I do use them sometimes. And this is one of those sometimes. Very, very convenient. Now what we're going to do is we're going to sew on the outside, so not where we already sewed, on the outside down here, up here, and over here to secure the pocket. Make sure you leave this part open that's up at this top by the angled edges so that you can put the paper with all the information in there. I'm going to start by just basting the strap on here so that we know that it's going to stay in place. And now I'm going to sew around here, but you'll notice that's pretty thick. So we're definitely going to be using leader fabrics. This time I'm going to use 2 so that the leader fabrics are about the same thickness as that pocket. See how that's nice and flat versus this that has a big bump. So we're going to put that all underneath. I'm going to put my foot down. I'm going to raise my bobbin thread, and I'm going to sew. Oh shoot, I didn't pay good attention. I really wanted where it came together to be down here on the bottom of it, but since it's all going to be folded and it'll only be looked at if there's a problem, I guess it'll be okay. So now we have the window sewn on and the strap basted onto the lining fabric, and then we have the exterior fabric. Now I do want to show you this. Both of my fabrics are directional and I want them to look the same. So this is the right direction. When it unfolds, I don't want this to be upside down. This is non-directional, so I didn't have to think about that at all. But for this one, I do. So what you do is you just put them down so that they're facing the same direction. So they're all facing me. And then I'm going to turn it over and put them right sides together. That way we know they're going to be going in the same direction. Now it's kind of bulky because we have this and then we have this. So it's important to make sure you are matching all of these edges well. We're going to sew all the way around with a 1/4 inch seam, and we're going to leave 4 inches open up here next to the pocket. Because these two pieces of fabric aren't going to be completely flat against each other due to the strap and the pocket, I use a lot more clips than I normally would for something like this. And it's really important to mark. So I'm going to feel this is where our pocket is. So I'm going to mark about a 1/2 inch from that edge, or that, see that angle there. You don't want to stop right there. I want to come in a little bit. And then I'm going to go down to where the other edge of the pocket is. So I'm going to sew from here all the way around to here. You want to go back and forth at the beginning and the end, since there will be a little strain on this seam as we turn it right side out. And if you don't sew a lot, sometimes it's very hard to eyeball where you're going to need to lift your foot and pivot. So if you want to make that easier, you could take a ruler and just mark that 1/4 inch line. So like that. If you just draw on the corners, you're going to know exactly when you need to pivot, right at the point where those lines intersect. Now we're going to carefully turn this right side out, trying not to bend that plastic too much because it will crease a little bit as it gets bent, see? But that's okay. Do your best and always remember that it's going to be on the inside. The plastic is not like the prime focus of this project. Pull on the strap to get that out. And now we need to use the turning tool to get these turned nicely so that you can see the angles there. Well, let's see how this works because I skipped a step. I forgot to clip the corners. Clip your corners. It's working better than I expected. I don't want to turn it inside out again because I don't want that to wrinkle any more than it already has. Now I'm going to take it to the ironing board and I'm going to press this and make sure these seams are out. They're not tucked in. And then also make sure you do not iron on top of the plastic. So the iron needs to go around the edges as you press because you don't want to melt that and ruin your tag and ruin your iron. Let's talk about thread really quickly. I've been using gold to go with the strap and the binding. And on this one, I used gold. And then when I sewed around the edges, I changed the bobbin to navy because I just didn't want the stitching to really be part of it. I just wanted it to blend in with the fabric. Now, because this one is blue and blue, I changed both the top and the bobbin threads to navy. I'm going to use my leader fabrics again. And you definitely want to pull up your bobbin thread so that you don't have any kind of a bird's nest knot because both sides of this stitching are going to show on your finished luggage tag. Pull up the thread, you hold them both, and then you either knot or go forward and back to knot while holding those threads. And then just take another stitch or two so that your machine isn't going to mistakenly pull that down and create a mess. And we're going to stitch all the way around. It's sometimes a little hard when you're stitching by the pocket because it's so close to the edge that it wants to push your foot off. So just go slowly and make sure your needle stays on the fabric and doesn't jump off. Go back and forth twice over where the strap connects because sometimes there's a little bit of pressure and we don't want our luggage tag falling apart when it is being handled by the airport. Now that we have sewn all the way around, we are going to flip this down and we are going to sew basically as close as you can because that's really thick there. We're going to sew across there about 1/4 inch from this edge. And the reason we need to do that is so that it will fold and sit properly when you put the strap through the buttonhole to close the luggage tag. Now all that's left is to put a 3/4 inch buttonhole in the center over here. And because every machine is different in how they do buttonholes and how the buttonhole feet work, you're just going to need to look at your instructions and learn how your machine does that function. There are so many times and ways you could make luggage tags. They'd be fun for a girls' trip, for a family vacation, have everybody have matching tags. It could be a fun bridal shower gift, start their new lives together with new luggage tags. Let me know in the comments what you would make luggage tags for. Now we just need to grab our seam rippers and open that buttonhole. And I'm going to do what my grandma taught me to do. Put a pin across the end of the buttonhole so that you don't get overzealous and cut through those end stitches. Now I'm going to put my seam ripper straight through and then very, very slowly cut the fabric that is in between those buttonhole stitches. And you'll see it won't go any further because I put that pin in there. Now it's done. All you need to do is put a piece of paper with your contact information in. You're just going to fold this in half, take the strap, put it through the buttonhole, now pull that closed, and I have a super cute luggage tag ready to go. And I actually have 2 that are going to coordinate for my trip. Let's look at these 2 types of plastic that I used for the windows. This was the photo lamination product. And then this one was the page protector. Now, more people have page protectors in their home than they have laminators and laminating pouches, so I wanted to give you options. So if you give this a try and post it on social media, be sure to tag me. I am at Artist Tara Reid. Be sure to subscribe to my channel so you don't miss any more free tutorials. And I would also like to invite you to check out my membership at sewwithtarareid.com. You can watch the video and learn how to make this. My members also have very detailed directions with lots of photos for this project as well, but that is a member exclusive to get the printed pattern. Try it for $1, see if you like it. It's a lot of fun and it's ad-free. So be sure to check it out at sewwithtarareid.com/$trial. Happy sewing and safe travels. If you are packing for a trip, these do not go in the suitcase without a bag. This is so easy to make. It keeps everything clean in your suitcase. And because it has a French seam, it is totally washable. The size for women's is perfect. If you cut it 22 inches long and you cut the width of fabric in half, you get the perfect size for most women's shoes. The beauty of doing a French seam, which is like this, which basically means encasing the raw edges in there, is that this is going to get dirty from these shoes too. So you can always pop those in the laundry with everything else when you get back from your trip. I've seen them before where they've had zippers, but I don't want to do a zipper for a shoe bag. This is the quickest and easiest way. Drawstring, one side, the extra fabric folds up. You can make it nice and tight, and they're cute. Of course, my husband didn't want one quite as cute, and his shoes didn't fit in this size bag as well. So what I made for him was a bit more manly, and I cut this one 28 by 20, added a drawstring. Still plenty of room, can fold it up, compacts beautifully. So now we are ready to travel and all of our clothes are going to stay clean. So let's talk about what you need to make some for yourself. I'm going to make another men's size bag because I have made more for myself than I made for my husband, I will admit. So this piece of fabric is 28 inches by 20 inches high. The other thing we're going to need is a cord. I like to use this paracord, which melts. So I'm also going to use a lighter to melt the ends once we get it all together. Safety pin to put that string through. Otherwise, all we need is our sewing machine and iron. These things whip up in no time flat. The first thing we're going to do is we are going to match the ends. And we want to make sure we have this wrong sides together because, again, we're doing a French seam. And while this seems weird, and I will admit I have done it backwards by mistake, this is how we want to go. It is really important to get these edges matched very, very well because what we're going to do is we're going to sew about 1/8 of an inch from the edge. Then we're going to flip it the opposite way so that the right side is on the inside, and then we are going to sew again. But if you don't have these edges lined up well, you might not catch these first row of seams in the French seam. Next, because we're going to do a drawstring channel, I'm going to mark down 2 inches from the top. So I'm putting a pin 2 inches from the top because that is where we want to start sewing. You don't want to sew all the way to the top because of how we're going to be making the channels. So we're starting to sew at this pin. We are going to sew 1/8 of an inch from that raw edge. We're going to go down the side and across the bottom. Now that we have sewn, we're going to take it to the ironing board. We're going to turn it wrong side out and make sure you push out those corners. Now, because we are going to be encasing this raw edge, we need to do a really good job pressing these seams so that that seam is right on the crease. And I often just roll it with my fingers a little bit to get it out so that both sides are even and that that seam is right on the edge. In addition to using these for shoe bags, you could use this size or a little bit bigger as a laundry bag. So now that we have that pressed nicely, we're going to go back to the sewing machine. Now we are going to sew down the side and across the bottom like we did the last time, but this time we will be catching that seam inside our stitching. So you want to go a little more than 1/4 inch from the edge. You can go 3/8 of an inch or just kind of wing it. You can feel with your finger where that other seam is. We just need to make sure it is on the right-hand side of our needle. Start where you started sewing before, not all the way at the top. We need that top section to make our drawstring channel. Now back to the ironing board. Our next step is to make the channel to put the drawstring through, which is going to require folding it down once and twice so that we can sew. But we don't want this raw edge, so we need to work on that first. So what you're going to do is you're going to take your scissors and you're going to trim to the stitch line just above the stitch line. Does that make sense? So that you're creating these 2 flaps like that. So before we fold this down, we are going to fold these over twice, very thin, and press them. And then I'm just going to quickly jump to the sewing machine and sew straight down there and straight down there. Since I think you know how to sew straight, I'm just going to go do that, and it's going to be presto changeo, done. And then I will be back to the ironing board to show you how I use this hot ruler to make turning things down evenly a breeze. So like magic, I just sewed down there so that this is going to be a nice finished edge as well. And our safety pin won't get caught when we put the drawstring through. The goal here is to fold a teeny bit down and then fold it down so that this fold is basically lined up with where we cut. This hot ruler is really cool. It is a ruler that you can iron right on top of, and it is no problem. And it has all the different markings. So it's an easy way to quickly get things even. So I'm just going to put it up there so that I will be folding down 1/4 inch. And I can just do this and glide my iron right on there. And I'm going to grab my quilter's clapper, press down. That takes some of the heat out of the fabric, and it also makes that seam a little bit sharper. It isn't quite as sharp as if you just folded it down because of the slight thickness of the ruler. So I usually just go back over it one more time. Now I'm going to flip it over and do the same thing on the other side. And then all we have to deal with is the fold. When you do the second side, you want to make sure you keep the first side folded down so that you're not unpressing it. And then with these 2 sides pressed so nicely, you can just kind of pull it like that. And that fold is going to work and be the correct length. If you need to nudge it a little bit, do that. And now we just need to bring it down to here. So I'm going to use this more as a guide than to flip it over. I'm going to put this lined up with where we want it to end. And then I'm just going to fold down so that that first fold is right along my ruler. This is a handy, handy tool that a lot of people don't know about or don't have. And once you get it, you're going to be like, wow, where have you been all my life? Please do not try this with an acrylic ruler because things will not go as well. And this is a hot ruler from Clover. Again, lining it up with that cut line with this side. Flip where it folds. Put it flat. Give that one more press. Now we're just going to sew right along that edge. We're in the home stretch. All we need to do is add our cord, and this shoe bag is ready to go. So we are going to turn it right side out. We have this beautiful French seam with all the edges encased. And sometimes you might have a few stray threads coming out. Here's one. Just grab it, don't pull too hard, and then just snip that off. Now we need to measure the drawstring. You can use any kind of material, of course. I'm going to use this paracord. I love using this for drawstring bags. So to figure out how long you need it to be, I just put it across and I add about 4 to 5 inches, and then I double that. Now, because this is nylon, if you just cut it, it will fray a bit. So my trick is you take a piece of painter's tape and you put it over the spot that you want to cut, so that when you cut it in half, half of it that you're going to be threading and using is going to be under the tape. And then the other half will be protected for putting that away and storing it until you use that again. Because this channel is wide enough, I'm going to use a quilting pen because it will be a little bit quicker to thread this through than using another one. And I'm just going to put the pin looped through like that. If you just put it through one way, this ends up folding back and it makes it a little bit harder Then you're just going to put it in one end and keep going until it comes out the other end. Now, I have seen shoe bags that have a double drawstring, but to me, for something that's just keeping your shoes away from your clothes in your suitcase, I really don't think that that is necessary. That would require another whole row of French seam to sew. So I'm a big fan of just cutting a piece of fabric, folding it in half, and doing a single drawstring. This isn't a decorative project, but a practical one. All right, so now we have that coming back out. We can take our pin off. Then I just try and even up the ends. And while this is all flat, you want to tie this end in a knot. And it really doesn't need to be much further than where it goes in and out of the fabric. Like, you don't have to have this very long. You just want to make sure this is flat so it's open as wide as it will go. Now I'm just going to trim about a 1/2 inch to 1 inch from that knot. And here's what I'm talking about. This paracord, it very easily frays apart. But because it is made of, I believe, nylon, it will melt. Be very careful using flames. I'm just going to gently put that on there. You can really see the black melting. You don't have to do it much. You don't want to do it long. The goal is not to catch this on fire, but just to melt the ends. Ooh, I can feel it sticky. When it dries, it'll harden, and then that is never going to fray. So now our shoe bag is done, and it is ready for my husband's sneakers. Put them in the big part down first on its side, and then the bigger part up top. They go in super fast. And now we are ready to go somewhere and have fun. This drawstring shoe bag is so easy to make, and it is the perfect gift for anyone who travels, whether it's the occasional vacation or someone who is constantly on the go. This keeps their shoes away from their clothes. It is super simple, compact to pack, and it is easy to make. So the question is, who will you make one for first? Are you ready for an easy and super practical project? Today, I'm going to show you how to make a padded eyeglass case in, like 10 or 15 minutes. I've done the testing. I've made just a few. Originally, I tried it with batting. That's what a lot of people seem to do. But I have decided I really like using this flexi foam from Pellon. It is so much more protective. You can really see here how much more protective that's going to be for your glasses. Now, fleece, fusible fleece, quilting fleece, it's going to be fine if you're using inexpensive glasses like readers from the Dollar Tree or inexpensive sunglasses. But I am of an age where I have multiple pairs of prescription glasses. I've got computer glasses, I've got my everyday progressives, which are on my face, and then I've got larger also prescription sunglasses. So they need to be protected more than this. I also played with some sizes. These two are bigger than what I landed on. You can also, double check your glasses. But this fits well, in and out, really easy. Also fits my sunglasses, which are bigger. So I'm definitely a woman that needs lots of these cases. I also love to have one in my purse at all times because when it's raining, and if you wear glasses, you're going to know what I'm talking about. When it's raining and you're going from the car to a store, your glasses get wet. It's so annoying. So I like having one of these in my purse. It's small. It's very lightweight. I can put my glasses in there, run through the raindrops, and then get my glasses back on so that I can see in the store or see to drive. So let's make these. And we're just going to make a really simple one. This has one fabric on the outside, one fabric on the inside. And this is from my June fabrics for the monthly placemat panels from Riley Blake Designs. And I thought this is perfect for sunglasses because if you're going berry picking, you're going to need your sunglasses. So you need basically 3 things. You need 2 pieces of fabric, and you're going to pay attention to the directionality. So top and bottom, you don't want this sewn this way so all your fruit is sideways on your glass case. So 2 pieces of fabric, 7.5 inch square. That is, to me, the best size. If you wear larger glasses, you can go wider. You probably won't need to go taller unless you want to put a big snap or something in the top, then maybe just increase that a little bit. If you are going to do something like this, just sew things together and then just trim it down to 7.5 inch square. Then on this
foam, it is called Flexi Foam, and it is fusible on one side, and you can feel it. It's softer on the non-fusing side and a little bit, I don't know, rougher, scratchier on the side that will fuse to your fabric. And this, you want to be 7.5 inches wide. Let me show you on this one, it'll be easier to see. So the same width as your fabric, but 7 inches high, so that you have a 1/4 inch that is just fabric on the top and bottom. That is going to decrease the bulk down here at the bottom and also at the top, where you're going to be top stitching and having your lining and fabric meet up. It's not a big deal on this seam, and it also helps you know which way to go and make sure that that foam does stay secure and where you want it to be. So first thing you do is, we're going to use this for the outside. I always put my foam on the outside fabric. So I'm going to turn that face down, and then I'm going to put the foam on top of it and get it centered. So we have about a 1/4 inch of fabric showing on the top and the bottom. Now, I don't like to press directly onto the foam, so you could either use a pressing fabric or I just flip it over. This is upside down, obviously. This is going to be the top of the case. And now I'm just going to go to the iron, follow the directions, and press that foam onto this piece of fabric. And then I will be right back to show you what we do next. Okay, now I have the foam fused onto the outer fabric, again, with about a 1/4 inch here and here. If it's not perfect, you're fine. It will work out, no problem. So now what we're going to do is we're going to put these fabrics right side together. Now, because they're square, you need to pay attention if your fabric's at all directional. We don't want to do it this way so that the inside's going sideways. We don't want our strawberries all upside down. You want to make sure everything is facing towards the top. So we're going to line those up. And then I'm just going to flip it over because I'm going to be sewing from this side. And then I like to use these fabric clips, and I like to put them on either side. I put one here because I'm going to start stitching up here. And then I usually put one at the bottom, or like 2 here, just to make sure this fabric isn't going to slide around while we're sewing this. So now we're going to go to the sewing machine and we're going to sew with a 1/4 inch seam straight across here. Now I'm using a 1/4 inch presser foot, so a 1/4 inch is just going right along the edge of that foot. So I'm just going to sew, and I didn't get the foam lined up perfectly because normally it would be right along there, but it's going to be totally fine and it will work out no problem. So I'm just going to sew straight along here. All right, now I'm going to take it to the ironing board, and this is, remember the front where the foam is, and I'm just going to press it towards the lining. All right, so we have the lining and the outside sewn together. So this seam right here is going to be your top edge. And I've normally been putting my little tag on the inside about 1 inch down. You can see it's kind of hidden in there, but I have people that look for it, especially my family, when I give them things. Where's your tag? So if you want to put any kind of a tag made by me or your logo, your name, and you want to put it inside, you can do that. But I'm going to show you how to put it on the outside, just so I've shown it both ways. So now what you're going to do is you're just going to fold this in half. I start by matching the seam and clip that. And then I'm just lining up the straight away. These are all my technical terms, straight away. When you sew it, you need to make sure, I always usually just stick my finger in here, you need to make sure that this fabric is not like off center or rumpled. You want to make sure that's nice and flat. That's where we're going to start. So to put my tag on the outside, so it's going to be on the outside, I'm just going to tuck it in wherever I want it. So if I want it at the bottom, and have it towards the top. So I'm going to put it right there. I'll just clip there so I know exactly where that tag is. Now I'm going to take it to the sewing machine, and you'll notice this is about a 1/4 inch. It's going to go over the foam a teeny bit, which again, it's fine. We're just reducing bulk. I'm going to sew this way and down here, leaving this completely open for turning. And instead of just knotting at this end, I do like to double back because there's going to be a bit of strain on that as we flip this entire thing right side out. So let's go get that sewn. We are almost done, if you can believe it. Now I'm going to sew here to here with a 1/4 inch seam. Now I'm just going to clip the corner a little bit right there on that angle, but make sure you don't clip any of your stitching. And now we are just going to turn it right side out. Now, because this is such a long tube, basically, I often use a ruler to get the corners mostly turned, just really gently and slowly pushing along those seams to get that corner out. Because it's a great length. Then I will go back in with a seam turner or point turner, that's what it's called. But you have to be very gentle with this because if you push too hard, you're going to pop right through your seam and the edge of your fabric. So just go really slow and really gentle. So at this point, you don't want that coming out. I've had it happen. Let's see how that made that corner come out so much better. This one is just always going to be bulkier because it has the bulk from this side as well as the bottom. So, all right, so now we are almost done. Now we are just going to press this flat. Then you're going to turn under the raw edge of the lining about, I don't know, you've already done a 1/4 inch over here, so you can do a little bit more because it's not going to go as far down in there. So 3/8 to a 1/2 inch turned under. I'm just going to press that. Now I'm just going to top stitch the edge of the lining, and I don't worry about what color thread I have in here because you will never see the bottom of this lining again. Once your case is together, you really only see a little bit of the top of the lining. Now what we need to do is push the lining inside the case. And because the fabric is going against foam, sometimes it doesn't go in as smoothly as you would think it would. So we're going to use the ruler again. So I just take the ruler and I can feel how it is pushing the fabric and just gently, so we're not ripping anything, just move it from side to side and you can tell when it's in there. Now we're just going to use our hands, table's in the way, just kind of pull this up so that the lining fabric and the outer fabric and that top seam are lined up. Like one isn't showing too much on either side. And if you want to, you can take that back and press that. Oh my gosh, I feel like an X-ray technician moving my camera trying to get you an angle so you can see what I'm doing. Does anybody else ever feel like that? So now we're just going to top stitch about 1/8 of an inch from this edge just to keep everything nice and secure in place and look finished. You can just leave it like that if you prefer, but I like to do a little bit of top stitching. Sometimes I will match the thread to the lining, so I could make that blue and then I always match the bobbin to the outside, but I'm just going to go for white. Now, when you get to this part where you're sewing over that side seam, it's a bit thicker, so you want to make sure you go nice and slow so you don't break your needle. And that's it. It's done. So let's go look at the few that we made.
Today's video is going to the dogs, dog bandanas in particular, that fit right over their collar. We are going to make these out of simple squares of fabric. This is one of my most viewed videos on YouTube, but I've gotten a little feedback that it moves a little too quickly. So today I'm going to talk you through it and I'm going to show you and explain the different size squares that you need for small, medium, or large dog collars. I took the small collar out of the one that I had already made and showed you just so you can have a visual of the 3 sizes. And we're mostly looking at the widths, not the color, nothing else. So let's talk about the squares that we need for each of these. We will start with the small, which is this one. You're going to start with an 8-inch square. So that's pretty easy to find out of scrap fabric. Then you're going to turn it on its side so it's a diamond. And I like to line it up on my grid just to make sure that I have everything straight. So these 2 points will become this bottom point of the bandana, and these two are going to be folded, cut, and sewn to make the channel for the collar. So for the 8-inch square, we are going to fold the sides in 1 3/4 inches. So what I like to do is take my handy dandy heat erasable pen and take a ruler. And the reason I get my square lined up on this grid is so that if I line my ruler up on the grid, I know I will be drawing straight on the corners of this fabric. So I have it lined up to 1 3/4. I'm going to draw a line. And I know that's dark, but it doesn't matter because once we hit it with an iron, it will disappear. We're going to do this on both sides. So we have the first one marked. We're going to be folding that under. Now let's take the second one. The medium size, you need a 10 by 10 fabric, which is perfect because if you like buying these stackers, I mean, look at how many bandanas we could make out of this stacker of all 10. So I'm going to do this one, these little flowers, but I do want to show you one thing to consider if you are using stackers. This is directional this way, but when we turn it this way and fold it and it becomes the bandana, it just doesn't look good because everything's sideways. It's not going this way. So don't use a directional fabric if it's already pre-cut into a stacker. Now, if you want to use the directional fabric, you can always cut it, but just make sure you cut it so that the direction is going this way. Hopefully that makes sense. But anyway, that's going to save me some time. I don't have to cut the 10-inch. I just have to line it up on my grid. And then for this one, we are going to fold the sides in 2 inches. So I'm just going to put my ruler 2 inches in, draw my line. And this one has to go in a little bit more because this collar is wider than this one. So we're going to be needing a wider channel. So we have the small one marked, the medium one marked. And now we need the large one. So the large dog bandana needs a 12 by 12 square. That's for this one. And again, we're just going to do the same thing. I'm going to line it up on my mat. And this one we're going to fold in 2.5 inches. The side we're going to mark, line it up on a grid so that it's easier to just double check 1, 2.5, because you're using your ruler, and I'm also using the grid to make sure I'm drawing these lines in the correct place. Okay, large, medium, small. Let's grab the iron. So we're going to iron and fold on all of these lines that we just drew, and the lines are going to disappear when the heat hits them. So you want to make sure that you fold that over and kind of finger press it right on that line. Because once we hit it with heat, the line will be no more and you will not know where it was. Of course, you can always remeasure, being a little more dramatic than I need to be. Just do that. And then if you have a quilter's clapper or tailor's clapper and you want to use it, you're just going to iron and then just press that down. It absorbs the heat. It absorbs any steam if you're using steam in your iron. And my favorite part is it makes the fabric not so hot, so you're not burning your fingers. So we're going to do this fold on all 3 of these bandanas. Triangles are folded in for all 3 sizes to make the channel on our dog bandana. So I'm going to move the ironing board for a minute and we are going to trim again. Now this is where sometimes people think I do it a little weird, but I'm going to give you the reason why. I like to make the marks from the points and press it in once first before trimming, because what we're going to do is we're going to fold this and fold this to this line so that we can sew just like this. So you'll see that's folded and folded so we have no raw edges. You can be more exact if you already have that crease set. I'm going to line that crease up on a grid line so that it's easy to see where that 1/2 inch actually is. So fold on the crease line, open it up. You might notice I have quite a few sizes of rulers, and it isn't necessary. If you're a beginning sewer, you can get 1 ruler and you will be good to go. If you do that, let's see, if you're just starting out, I would get a ruler like this. This is 24.5 inches, something big that will be straight all the way across fabric if you buy it by the yard, because you can always work with that with anything, but I'm going to show you here. So just when you're doing smaller things, it's a little bit more, oh, my fabric moved. It's a little bit more cumbersome to move around when you're cutting smaller pieces. That's why I'll usually grab a smaller ruler, but this works just fine. You can always add more ruler sizes as you continue with your craft. Or not, totally up to you. Now what we're going to do is we're going to fold that into the crease, and I'm going to finger press it, which basically means just press down with your fingers to kind of get it to stay. And then I'm going to fold it again to where we had ironed that fold. Adjust if necessary, then press that. So that is creating the channel, this part, for our dog bandana. So I'm going to do that on each side of each bandana. And if you want to put a pin or clip on there, you can. Usually don't bother with that. We're going to be sewing the part we just folded down so that it's not going to pop up as you put your collar through the channel. And since we're going to be sewing from the back side of the fabric, and you don't want a big old bird's nest knot here by mistake, I'm going to show you how to pull up the bobbin thread. It's one of my favorite tricks, so you might have seen this before. You're going to hold the top thread, and then you're going to put the foot down, put the needle down, lift the needle back up, and give it a little tug. That gets the bobbin thread up to the top, so you can be holding both. Then you're going to put them under the foot. Now let me try and do it this way. And then my machine does have an automatic knotter, so I'm just going to do a knot. And I'm holding these 2 strings tight while I do that so that they can't get sucked back down and create that bird's nest. Now, if your machine doesn't knot on its own, you're going to go forward 2 or 3 stitches and then backward 2 or 3 stitches. Now I'm just going to do this for the rest of those pieces that we folded on all 3. Now, because I'm doing a few, I can chain stitch them just like you would for quilt blocks if you're a quilter at all, which basically means I'm not going to lift it and then have to pull the bobbin thread up every time. I'm just going to feed my second dog bandana along, and then I'll just cut them apart at the end. That can be a real time and thread saver. So if you've never done this before, this is what it's going to look like. You basically have a very small amount of thread right here in between. I'm just going to snip that, leave this one on, and then I'm just going to turn this around and do the other side of all 3. Back to the ironing board. We have all of the channels stitched. So now what we need to do is we need to fold them right sides together, match the points, and match the ends of the channels. And we're just going to press this top edge real quickly on all 3. And the next thing is we're going to sew here to here. So I am just going to put a couple little clips just to make sure the fabric stays lined up. You can use pins as well, but to me this is the perfect kind of project to use clips because it doesn't have to be super, super precise, and the clips are going to hold it together just fine. So even though I'm doing 3 because I'm showing you the 3 different sizes, this does give you an idea of efficiencies that you can use if you're making more than one of any specific project. If you group what you're doing, like do all of this pressing, do all of this sewing, do all of this, for all the ones that you're doing, you're going to be saving time. You can also do that chain stitching like I showed you, save some thread, save some time not pulling bobbin threads up 6 times. You just did it once. All right, back to the sewing machine. Now we're just going to be sewing down this side and up this side, basically from channel to channel with a 1/4 inch seam. And we're going to come down to this point and we're going to pivot. Now I just want to give you a little tip. If you're new to sewing or you're teaching kids to sew, this can be really helpful. You can take a ruler, because we're going to be turning down here, right? And so you can take a ruler and make a little mark a 1/4 inch from that edge. And then you can do the same thing on this side. And then you or they won't have to pay as much attention to where you are based on the foot or the markings on your sewing machine. You can just go to that point, pivot, and move. And it's going to be a really big confidence booster for beginning sewists. Even though my machine does have the automatic knot, I'm going to go back and forth on both ends because we're going to have to turn this through this pretty small channel, especially on this small one. And it's going to put a little bit of strain on that seam. So I like to reinforce it by going back and forth. So you'll notice my needle is at that mark, or almost, let's see. Yeah, it's like a hair before it. Now it's a hair after. And these markings on my 1/4 inch foot are at the edge of the fabric. So that, if I don't mark it, that is how I know that it's time to lift my presser foot and pivot to do a 1/4 inch on the opposite side. And just like with the last one, we can chain piece these. So I just overlap it where I can, make sure this is going to be lined up with the edge of my 1/4 inch foot, and just move forward. We're in the home stretch. The next thing we need to do is we need to clip our corners. You can either clip it straight across like that, but keep it a little away from the stitching. You do not want to cut the stitching. Or, and I prefer this way, especially with a point like that, is you can come in and take a little bit more off on each side. Because then there's less fabric that has to go in here and it's going to turn to make a better point. And you can just do it from the beginning. You don't have to go straight across first. I just wanted to show you the 2 ways to go. Now you'll see I didn't get right on that line, but it's fine. For a project like this, no one's going to know that it should have been a little bit over. Now, if this was a quilt block, that would have been a problem, but it's not, so we are good to go. Next step, we're going to turn these right side out through the channel. So you need to get the 2 channels turned out, and then we also need to get this point. And I always do it with my finger first, but that's not a very good point, is it? So I'm going to use this turning tool, which is designed to help get these points out. It's not too pointy. You still want to be careful. You could also use a chopstick or something else that isn't going to mark your fabric. But no matter what you use, make sure you are gentle as you massage that point, because if you go too hard, you could end up with this popping through, and then there will be sadness. Now we are going to iron this, and I'm going to make sure that that seam is on the edge so that it's nice and even on both sides. Now we're going to do the other 2. And when I'm getting these seams straight, I just kind of roll it a little bit to massage it to where I want it to be. And for these bigger ones, I'll do one side at a time because it's harder to get both of these sides to stay. So all 3 of these are pressed. You could just put the collar through without sewing the channel line. So you could leave it like that versus this, so you wouldn't have a stitch line, but you can also make the stitch line match the fabric so it won't really show. But I feel like doing this extra step keeps the bandana in place a little bit better, so I always do it. But it's totally up to you. If you like this look without another stitch line on there, try it and see how you like it. You can always come back and add it later if you decide that you're like me and you're like, yeah, you know what, she was right. I want to put that in there. So what we're going to do is grab our pen again, and I'm just going to draw a line that is parallel to this top fold and just about at the end of our channel. The main thing to do is you want to make sure there's enough space for this hook to go through. So even if we moved it up a little bit, it would be getting a bit tight because this has a little thickness to it too. So that is why we made these channels these specific sizes. Okay, 3 more lines to sew. Back to the sewing machine. So let me know how you would use these. Are you going to make seasonal bandanas for your own dogs? A lot of groomers will make quick bandanas for when they groom a dog. They send them home all fancy in a new bandana. This is also a great thing to sew and sell. This is very basic, very fast way to make them. Today we're going to do a really quick no-sew fabric project using a glass tray. You can use any kind. I got this one for $3 in the Target dollar bin. You can also check out the Dollar Tree or other places. They're going to have something glass, a piece of fabric, and we are going to Mod Podge that to the bottom of the tray. And it's just going to make a really cute tray for storing whatever. It could be sewing notions, it could be makeup brushes, it could be an area to throw your keys when you get home. You can make it as a gift. Well, the first thing you need to do is get the label off. If you don't get all of the label and the sticky off, it will show because the fabric is going to show through. So you can see how you can see that. Well, that was no fun. The trick to getting labels off that don't just peel off really easily is to hit them with a hair dryer because that will soften the adhesive and then it is much, much easier to get off. But you'll see I got that off. No more big square going to show through. The next thing you need to do is to clean your glass. And for that, I just take some rubbing alcohol on a cotton round and rub that over the entire bottom where we are going to be gluing the fabric. And then we're going to just let that dry. This is the fabric I'm going to use. You can use any kind of scrap or anything that you find that you like. You could also do this with wrapping paper or a child's artwork, lots of things. You can use the same technique, lots of ways, but I'm going to show you with fabric. So I'm going to put this right side down, wrong side up. I'm going to place the tray right on top of it. It does have straight sides, but it has a curve. So we are going to need to cut that either just with scissors or with a rotary cutter and scissors. But you don't have to have quilting and sewing supplies to do this. I am drawing with a heat removable pen. So you could use a pencil, you could use whatever your favorite kind of marker is. I like these because you can really see it when it's on there and it will disappear when you heat it. Okay, so you can see that really well. So now I'm going to cut the straight parts with a rotary cutter, and then I'm just going to take scissors and cut those curves. And I'm going to go slightly in from the line because we want to make sure the fabric is really on the inside and not tucking over or, having any over the edge. This is such a fast project. This is great for teacher appreciation, great for Mother's Day, Christmas gifts, neighbor gifts. If you're on an organizing spree in your home and you just want it to look really cute and pretty. So let me know in the comments what you would use these for. Would you use them for yourself? Would you use them for gifting? Now, if I was cutting the whole thing with scissors, I would use bigger scissors. But because now all I need to do is kind of curve the corners, I'm just grabbing smaller scissors. They're a little bit more precise and I can see that line a little bit better. Now, before we break out any glue, I'm going to put this upside down and we are just going to test and see how this looks on the bottom. So we do have a little bit of adjusting to do. This is truly just a little bit of trial and error. So leave your perfectionist ways at the door if you have them. I definitely have them. Okay, that looks really good. Now I'm going to get just this old vinyl tablecloth that I use for everything messy. Obviously, I use it for painting, and I'm just putting this down because I do not want to get Mod Podge on my cutting mat. Now I'm just going to do kind of a heavy coat. You want it to look white. When you put that down, we're going to go all the way to the edges. You don't want to take too long because you don't want it to dry before you get your fabric on there. All right, that's well coated all the way onto those corners. And now remember, you want to put this right side down because the fabric is under the glass and you want to see the pretty part. And then you're just going to center that. You can scooch it a little bit once you put it down, and then you're just going to press down. Rub your fingers across that. Now, if you have any threads coming out, now is a good time to grab and cut those. Take a peek at that. And now we are just going to do one more coat on the back. You want to get the edges so that it seals any threads that might try and escape from the main fabric, but you don't want to go too far over because you want the sides to look nice and neat. If you get kind of a hunk of glue off the edge, just use your finger and wipe that off as you go. It does dry clear, but you will be able to tell that it's there. And that is all there is to it. Now we just need to wait for this to dry. Ready for a quick project that'll get that fabric stash down?
We're going to make coasters today. I am going to show you how quickly these little coasters sew up from 5 squares of fabric and a little bit of fleece. Let's get started. Making these coasters is so easy, and the first step is to iron a few things. So these are going to be the 4 prints. We're going to use the burgundy one twice that will be on the front. So here's an idea of 1, 2, 3, 4. This one used the cream twice, and then 1 fabric on the back. So the brown is going to be the back. So we're going to fuse the fleece onto there. It's 1/4 inch shorter on each side. You want to make sure the gritty part, which is the fusible material, is on the wrong side of your back fabric. And then you're just going to follow the manufacturer's instructions. I am using a Pellon fusible fleece. So no steam, just press down for about 10 seconds. So we have that attached. We're going to set that aside. Now we're going to take each of these prints that will be on the front, that'll be kind of woven together, and I'm just spraying it, misting it with water instead of using a steam setting on my iron. Now we have our 4 pieces. We're going to turn the back right side up and put it down on your workspace. And then I'm going to use this again just to show you. Now, if you're using 2 prints, because I'm using 3 prints from one of my collections, this is a September leaf toss from my monthly placemat panels from Riley Lake Design. So I'm using 2 of them twice instead of using 4 different prints, because that's what I want to do. So if you're using 2 that are the same, you want to use them alternately. So the first one you put down and the third one, or the second and the fourth one. So when you're placing these on top of the backing, you want to make sure your raw edges are on the outside. The folded edge is going towards the center. So you're just going to line them up around the square. And so you'll notice I have the same print matching, so it's going to be this corner and this corner. Now, when you go to put your 4th one, you're going to take the first one and you're going to fold it down. And then you're going to place the 4th one and then fold this back up. And that is how you get it to weave together so that you're seeing 1 quadrant for each of the 4. Now I'm going to grab some fabric clips and I'm just going to clip this whole thing together. And I like to clip right at where they all come together on these 4 sides. And then if you want to, you could clip kind of where you turn, but I find that this works really well. Now I'm going to take it to the sewing machine. We're going to sew all the way around, and there is no need to leave an opening for turning because we're going to turn through these folds. So, fun fact, I thought I videotaped the sewing and the clipping and explaining of all this, but I took 1 photograph. Anyway, you can see that I sewed all the way around the coaster with a 1/4 inch seam, and then I clipped the corners. Now, what I wanted to tell you, and thought I told you, was instead of clipping just straight at the corner, clip twice so that you're removing a bit more of that fabric, because these corners are going to have a bit in them anyway between the folded over fabric, 2 layers, the backing, and a little bit of the fleece. So you want to clip that really well. Now, to turn it right side out, you simply put your fingers, get this open to the fold to grab at the back. Using your fingers, you're going to turn this right side out and get those corners pushed out as much as possible. And then if you need to, just grab like a turning tool, and then you can kind of push those corners out even better. Just do it slowly and gently because you don't want to push so hard that you push through the fabric and ruin your corner. Now, another thing, if you're going to use a turning tool, is make sure you also put that through all of the layers so that you're going against that fleece and not kind of in between 2 layers, because you're not going to get all the pieces of that corner. And that's it. Now I'm just going to press it so that it's nice and smooth. Some people will stitch all the way around again, but I just like the look of it where it looks like it's just fabric woven together.
All right, new year, new planner. I've been trying to get more organized and tried to do a lot of things digitally. I do a lot on my phone and my computer, but sometimes I just like to write. And I have fallen in love with these planners where I can just put notes, calendars, things that I just want to be able to move and see, and pockets and everything like that. And I like to use lots of different colors on the front. So it's kind of a combination bullet journal,
planner kind of thing that I have set up. So I wanted to make a zipper pocket so I could put all my pens in here and keep them organized and in one place instead of spewing all over my desk. So I want to show you how easy this is to do. And for this project, I am using 2 of the 3 prints from the February monthly calendar program that I have done for Riley Blake Designs. And these are the coordinating prints that go with it. There's also one that has yellow on the back as the background color, but I'm going to be using these 2. So let me show you how easy this is to do. First, let's talk about what you need. For this one, I've created it 7 inches long and it ended up being about 3.5 inches wide. That was created from 8 by 8 squares. So if you want it to be wider, you're going to go wider on your fabric. If you want it to fill the front of your planner a little bit more, like maybe you want to put sticker strips or something in there, you're going to make it a little bit longer. So this is the size pen. I use lots of different colors, and this is what I need to store. So this size ends up being really perfect because it's not too big, but it's a great size to put lots of them in there and be able to grab them. So that's why I ended up on this size. So this tutorial is going to show you how to make this size, but I'm also going to show you how to do the math if you want to do something bigger, if you have a different size planner than I do. So we'll talk about that in a minute. First, supplies. So you need an outer fabric and an inner fabric. You can do it just with 2 pieces of fabric. That's what we're going to do in this example. This one was made with a layer of fusible fleece as well. So what I did was I took one side and I fused fleece onto that so that it had a little bit more stability. It has a little bit more bulk with that too. So when we're done this tutorial, we're going to be able to compare how each of them sit on the planner so you can decide how you want to do yours. Then I am going to be using 3/8 inch braided flat elastic. And the reason I'm using this size is because it's what I have. I've used it for sleep masks. I've used it for other projects. So I don't want to have, 15 kinds of elastic sitting around my sewing room. So I'm just using what I have. You can use wider. You just want to use a flat elastic. That's the most important part of that. And I'm going to show you how to decide the size of that. Then a fabric pen or marker of some kind, coordinating thread. Then you also need a zipper that is larger than your fabric so that you can get it sewn in there nice and flat. So this is 8. I could have used a 10 inch. I didn't have a 10 inch, so I'm going with a 12 inch zipper. I'll just cut off the end to make that what I want it to be. Some clips. We already talked about the fusible fleece. And then I'm also going to use this new quilt measure from Riley Blake Designs. Very fun. See how it's got their little Riley Blake bird. I'm a fabric designer for them, so I get some of their little goodies. Let's get started. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to tack down the tabs on the zipper. So I'm going to open the zipper a little bit so that the pull doesn't get in the way of sewing. And I'm going to fold this down, and then I'm just going to use a little clip. I'm going to do that on both sides. Then I'm going to take it to the sewing machine, and with a zipper foot on, I'm just going to sew right here. It doesn't have to be exact. It doesn't have to be gorgeous. It's just to hold these tabs down for when we go to put it together. So now I have those tacked down. And now we're going to start putting the zipper onto the pieces of fabric. So whichever side you want to be on the inside, so the lining, you're going to put down first, face up. And we're going to unzip this all the way so the pull is not in the way of our sewing. And I'm going to start this where the metal end is about 1/4 inch from the end of the fabric. So if I put it on the mark, I can use the guides on this cutting mat to get that down correct. And then I'm just going to clip that together. Now, this is going to be the front. We're going to put it face down so that the right sides are together. We're going to line those squares up, and then we're just going to add that to what's clipped together. So we're basically making a sandwich where all of the edges are lined up, the lining, the zipper, and the front. All right, so now you're going to take this over to your sewing machine and you're going to sew along this edge and with a zipper foot without catching the zipper. I have that stitched on there. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this to the ironing board. I'm going to make sure I have all of these sides lined up. I'm going to iron there, and then I'm just going to do a top stitch about 1/8 of an inch from that zipper, and then we will come back and we will attach this side to this side of the zipper. So now we are going to take the front and we are going to pin it to the other side of the zipper. But I'm going to close the zipper about halfway just to make sure we're getting it lined up well. We want to make sure that this edge stays even and folds straight up and ends up on the other side evenly on the zipper. Because if you keep it unzipped, you may not get that lined up perfectly. And then over here, we can just match the metal stop to make sure we have that side done. Then I am going to reach in here and unzip it again so that the zipper is not in our way when we sew the zipper on the other side. So now that we have these two ends clipped, we can just line up the edge of the zipper and the edge of that fabric. Now we're going to flip it over. And we're going to do the same thing with this side. So we're going to make that sandwich again, where we have the front, the zipper, and the lining. And making sure you line up these edges so that that's going straight. And we're just going to add that to these clips. And just make sure the best way to get a zipper in straight is to take your time on this step and make sure all of these edges are lined up really well, and maybe do more clips than you would if you're just sewing along a regular seam. Okay, so now I'm going to go back to the sewing machine and I'm going to sew this one to the zipper, and then I will be right back. Stitch that zipper, and so now we have like this tube with the zipper on either side. So we're going to turn that right side out. And now I'm going to do the same thing on this side that I did over here. I'm just going to press and top stitch, just like on this side. Now the trickiest part of this project is getting the elastic right, that it isn't too small and doesn't warp your cover, and it isn't too big that it doesn't fall off. So the first one, this one that I did, see, it's pulling it a little bit, so it was a little bit shorter than I should have done. So I've come up with a new way to determine the elastic length, and I've decided that we should do it after we have this part sewn. So, and this math will be on my blog and in the printable for you to print out. So you want the planner height, which we're going to call PLH. Hopefully you can read my handwriting. My planner height is 11 1/4, and I'm showing you this math because everybody has different size planners, so I want you to know how to figure this out for whatever size planner you want to do. Then I need to know the height of my fabric. Still basically 8, that's good, that's what it should be. We're going to subtract 1/2 inch for the seam allowances, so we're going to say 7 1/2. And always measure that. When I did the one with the interfacing, the bulk made it a little bit shorter. So then the calculation is the elastic equals the planner height, which is 11 1/4 inches, plus the planner height minus the fabric, so minus 7 1/2, plus 1/2. We're going back to like middle school math. 11 1/4 minus 7 1/2, so that's basically 4. We're just going to round it and say 4 plus 1/2. So this is going to be 15 1/4 plus 1/2, 15 3/4. So I'm going to do 16. I'm adding a little bit extra because it'll take into account if my seam allowance is a little bit more than a perfect 1/4 inch because we're dealing with the zippers and everything. So now you can see this is what we're looking at this point. So we're going to zip that up, and then we're going to put the zipper perfectly on the top. And we're going to fold down here because what we need to do is we need to mark the center. I'm going to mark that center spot. I kind of pressed it, but I want to make sure I get it Get it down well. And what I use to mark just depends on the color. So I often like to use this pink pen. It's a heat erasable pen, but you can't see it on the red. So I'm just going to use a little bit of this chalk line. Now unzip this halfway. Now I'm going to clip the elastic where the center of the elastic is right on that center line. And I'm having the edge of the elastic flush with the edge of the fabric. And then I'm going to do the same thing with this other one. And also make sure you take your fingers and go like this to make sure your lining is smooth along your bag so you don't have this attached in a weird spot. So we have the elastic clipped on the outside. Now we are going to flip it over. We want to make sure you don't sew with this twisted. So I'm going to close it a teeny bit, then I'm going to flip it. There we go. And I'm going to close the zipper about 3/4 of the way so it gets everything lined up, and the elastic needs to stay on the inside. And now we're going to clip both ends together. So basically these two metal parts, the metal stop of the zipper, are going to be centered on that elastic. Put that down, and I'm going to clip along, just lining up all those edges. Okay, and now we're going to do the same thing over here where we have our chalk line. Oh, it disappeared. Our elastic, and then the zipper goes straight down that. I'm going to pin that right along the zipper just to make sure I have that elastic in there. Now I'm going to go and I'm going to sew with 1/4 inch down each side, and then I'm going to zigzag to encase the ends of this fabric. So straight sew first and then a zigzag. Just want to show you this last part. So I sewed along there and then zigzagged to hold the edge. Some people put seam binding on there. I don't think it's necessary because it's not like you're going to have wear and tear on that, and it adds a little bit of bulk. So I'm a big fan of the zigzag. Now this side, before we zigzag, you need to cut the zipper. And make sure you do not cut it with your fabric scissors because you're cutting through a big piece of plastic. So these are actually zipper cutting scissors. And make sure I always use a different kind. And we're just going to cut that flush. And now I'm just going to take it back and zigzag that edge, and we're almost done. All right, all we need to do now is turn it. So you can either turn it through that space, or you can just put your fingers in. I kind of turn it a little bit and try and get that zipper opened a little bit more. Well, actually all the way, and then it's super easy to flip. You're going to push those corners out. All right, so it's that simple. This one is a little bit longer because it doesn't have any interfacing. It's a little more floppy. So if you were putting stickers or something in there that you wanted it to not bend as much, you would want to go with an interfacing of some sort. But for my purposes, I'm just going to be putting pens in mine so they're not all over my desk and I have them nice and handy. So I think I'm going to say this one is the winner for my purposes. But do what makes you happiest. Make the size. I gave you all the measurements so that you can make them wider if you want to. And happy planning.
If you're a fan of 2.5 inch pre-cut strips that you buy in little packs like this, I'm going to show you how to turn your extra scraps into nail file holders. And I'm going to show you how you can make them for any size nail file. Have you ever stuck your hand in your purse and inadvertently messed up your nail, or scratched the top of your polish with one of the nail files in there? Ugh, it is the worst. This is where cute little fabric nail file holders come into play. Now, most nail files come in these 2 sizes. You can get those real little skinny ones too, the 7 inches and then the 3.5 inch long. And you can buy these in bulk. You'll be shocked at how inexpensive they are on Amazon. You can get like 100 to 200 of these for $5 to $10. And these for 100, you can get between, I think, $5 and $12. It just depends. If you want to just go with a basic color, it's going to be less expensive than something fun. This is an incredibly budget-friendly project. Let's start with this one. I am going to cut it to 14.5 inches long. Now, the way you figure out the length that you need is you measure the length of your nail file, you multiply it by 4, and you add 1/2 inch. Now we're just going to fold it, matching the short ends. We're going to take it to the sewing machine and just sew straight down both sides. Now we're going to sew each side with a 1/4 inch seam. Now, if you're going to be making more than one at a time, just daisy chain, go down one side of all of them and then the other side, and you can just clip them off and keep going in one long strip. From one 40-inch strip of 2.5-inch wide fabric, you can make one long and one short nail file holder. Now I'm just going to clip these corners a teeny bit on the folded end so that it's going to make a better point when we turn that right side out. And I like to do really long angled to get a lot of that fabric out of there. If you have tube turners, this is the perfect project for it. I use the 1/2 inch. If you don't, you're just going to use your fingers, turn these right side out. But let me show you how this tube turner works. You put the hollow part into your project. It's even more important on longer ones. And then you take your stick with the pointier end going in first, and you push the fabric into the tube and pull it. See how fast that is? Now, when you use the pointy part, you can then use that as your turner and push those corners out. You want to do that really slowly and gently so that you don't all of a sudden see that point come through your fabric and get really bummed. So that's set. If I didn't have the tube turner, I could turn this right side out. Like you turn anything right side out, push that in, pull it out as best you can. It's a little harder on your fingers. It takes a lot longer without this tool. And it's very inexpensive. They're usually under $10 for a set of 3. And I use them for so many different projects. I would highly recommend you go grab one. I will have a link to find it on Amazon, or you can find it in most sewing stores, Michael's, places like that. So imagine how much of a pain that would be to do by hand. But with the tube turner, it is lickety split. And this is the size for one of the longer nail files. So I pulled it down. You don't want to pull this off until you have the fabric through. Because you want to hold that fabric, pull that down, pull that off. But see how fast that was? These are amazing if you're making aprons and have those really long straps. You can turn them right side out in a jiffy. So now let's take all 3 of these. We're just going to make 3 at once today. We're going to take all 3 of these to the ironing board. So what we need to do is we need to get these seams pulled out evenly. We don't want it to be folded over. Like we don't want any of the fabric tucked in as we press. So I usually just take my fingers and I move them back and forth and get one side good and iron that side and then press down with the tailor's clapper. And then I come and do the other side. I find trying to do both at the same time, I often end up with one side not quite right where it's, not pulled out as much and then it's not going to be straight. And then I'm using this to help cool off the fabric and really set that so it is nice and flat. So I'm going to get all 3 of these to that same stage, and then we are going to press those raw edges in, and we are going to sew across the top to basically make a closed fabric tube. Turn that under about 1/4 inch. If you go a little bit further, it's totally fine. This is not a quilt block, so it's not something that needs to be super precise. Just make sure it is folded and even, and then press that.
I've seen other tutorials where people use interfacing or even a stiff interfacing to make the nail holders harder, but I really don't think it's necessary because the nail file is going to do that for you. And I am all about quick and easy projects with as few materials as possible. So let's not make this more complicated than it needs to be and just use a piece of fabric.
And as you can see, if you just do each step multiple times, you can really whip out a bunch of these at once. So that does make it a great gift, a great project or idea to sew and sell because you can use your fabric scraps. It's not going to take you a lot of time. The nail files aren't expensive, and it is a great impulse purchase if you sell at craft fairs or online. These are all pressed and ready, so we're going to go back to the machine and we're going to sew straight across the open edges of all 3. If you want your thread to coordinate so it's not very visible, you could pick something that matches. But because I'm doing a few, I'm just going to use white thread so that I can get all 3 of these done quickly. And I did one where it matched the green, so I'll be able to show you the difference that the thread can make. I'm going to use a little leader fabric, which is just a little scrap piece of fabric that I'm going to put behind what I am sewing, because then I can start back here. I don't have to worry about pulling up the bobbin thread, and I can just sew right onto here, back stitch,
and get that sewed closed. So you're not going to have any kind of a bird's nest on the project, and you don't have to take that time to pull up the bobbin thread. I like to do that when I'm starting off of the edge of a project. Just makes it easier and faster. So we have all three of those. Now we're just going to take that leader fabric off the back so that we can use it again. Snip these apart, cutting off the excess thread in between if there is any. And we're going to go back to the workspace. I'm going to show you how to decide how much to fold these up before we finish the sewing. Isn't this easy? Who are you going to make them for first? I would love to know. Now we are going to fold these up and sew them together. So this one, the nail file is almost all the way in. You can also make them longer and have them flap over, but this is the quickest and easiest way. So what you're going to do is you're going to take your strips of fabric and you're going to put the folded side up. Then you're going to place your nail file on there, and you're going to fold it up. If you want it to be exactly like that, you can just sew here and here as two separate stitch lines. But because I like things to move a little bit faster, I like to sew down, across, and up and be done. Which means this is going to stick out a little bit more because you're going to lose here. So see, that's where the edge of that nail file is. So now it's coming across the top. So I'm going to just move this down a little bit more, fold that up, because I want my file to not go above the backing. So that is how long I want that one. I'm just going to put a little clip in there and do the same thing on this one. And oh my gosh, isn't this tape measure perfect with the little quilt block fabric? Love it. So I'm pushing to make sure there's about a 1/2 inch up there, because then when I push that up a little to accommodate for the stitching that's going to go across there, we know how much it's going to come out. And if you don't want as much sticking out, just use a longer strip of fabric. Back to the sewing machine, we are almost done. Now on the last step, I taught you a trick to not have to pull the bobbin thread up, but here you're going to need to, because we're starting in the center of fabric. There's fabric in front and behind where you're starting, and you're going to see the back. What you do is you hold the top thread, put your foot down, put your needle down, lift your needle, give a little tug, and then I always keep tweezers so that I can grab that without poking my finger. It also helps me push those threads down, get it under the foot. Now I'm going to hold both of these threads as I take my first few stitches forward and back to knot. That will prevent the machine from pulling that thread under and creating what we love to call bird's nests. They are so quick and easy to sew. Throw them in your purse. These make great gifts. Teacher appreciation. They could be shower favors. You could put them into a little self-care box, a manicure gift, so many things that you can do with these. So that one is done. Now I'm going to do the same thing with the other two. All that's left is to add the nail files. How cute is that? Let me know in the comments if you're going to give this as a solo gift, if you're going to make a little manicure, pedicure gift pack with it, what you plan to do. I'm always curious about what people do with my projects. Make sure you have subscribed to my channel, hit that bell so YouTube lets you know every time I post something new, and let's have some fun sewing together. And then don't forget, I also have a membership at sewwithtarareed.com where you can find lots of tutorials. They will get written directions for this as well as the video tutorial with no ads. There's also exclusive content and many other things. You can try it for only $1 for 7 days. Jump in there, see if you like it, and hopefully you will decide to stay. There is a link below the video so you can find more information about that. I think I have a new project obsession. These little mini wallets, they're perfect for a gift card, for carrying your credit card, a couple dollars. You can hook them onto a lanyard with the D-ring, or you can put a lobster clasp and you can hook it onto your purse, carry little things around. This would be a fun way to make a functional gift bag for a gift card for the holidays, for teacher appreciation. They'd be cute little stocking stuffers. I have so many ideas of what to do with these. You can make them with your fabric scraps. So let me show you how easy these are to whip up, and maybe you too will get obsessed with them. Let's look at the supplies you need to make these cute little card holders, perfect for gift cards or credit cards. You didn't think I was going to show you my credit card, did you? This is a great project for fabric scraps, and I love to use cam snaps with them. So what you need are 2 pieces of fabric, one for the outside and one for the inside. I'm going to show you some tricks about using directional fabric to either be on the inside like this one, or to be on the outside so that everything is right side up. Then you'll need a piece of medium weight interfacing. And as I always say, the best interfacing or the best material is the one you have around your sewing room. I used the Pellon Easy Shaper Interfacing ES114 for this. You could use lots of different kinds. As long as it says medium weight, you will be good to go. Then adding a clip, either a clip like this or just a plain D-ring to the side is optional. But if you do want to do it, you just need 1 piece of fabric, 3 inches by 2 inches. You can either have it match the exterior or be the opposite of the exterior. And I will show you examples of how those choices vary. Then clips and or pins, your basic sewing stuff, rotary cutter, mat, rulers. I'm a huge fan of pinking shears for clipping curves. You know I love my quilter's clapper if you've watched many of my videos. You can get the free templates. The link will be in the description below this video. And I'm going to be using cam snaps because I love all the colors they come in and how just changing the color of the snap can change the look of your mini wallet. So let's get started. The first thing we need to do is decide which fabric we want to be the outside and the inside. Since I did this one with the sunflowers on the inside, this time we're going to do that on the outside. So this will be our lining, is we are going to put the fusible fleece onto the lining piece of fabric. The fusible side is usually a little bit shiny, or it might have some bumps depending on what product you're using. So make sure you have that down towards the wrong side of the fabric. And then you can either cut it the exact same size as this, or you can cut it a little bit smaller. So I do note that on this template. You might also notice that I did not cut the curves yet, and I will explain why in a minute. So I cut the interfacing a little bit smaller, so it's not going to be in the seam allowances, and that will be a little bit less bulk when sewing this together. You're going to follow the manufacturer's instructions, and then I always like to use a pressing cloth, which is basically a thin piece of cotton that you put over top. Then if you ever put your interfacing the wrong way, it's not going to adhere to your iron and possibly ruin your iron. It'll just stick to this pressing cloth. So we have the interfacing on our lining. I am going to put a D-ring on this bag. So you could do a D-ring, like if you're going to put it on a lanyard that has a clasp like this, you would just hook it like that. Or if you think you're going to hook it on something that has a D-ring or just a ring like on your purse, you might want to use a clasp like this. Either one, you can use the same size fabric. And I'm going to do fabric that matches the exterior. So for this one, it's opposite. And so this time I'm going to show you how it looks when you do the same. Now this is the most important part, but you want to have it this way. So the shorter end is facing you and the longer end is on the side. And then you're going to fold and press that in half. If you do it the opposite way, it's going to be too long and skinny. I did put a note on the free template where the first fold line is, because sometimes I do it this way, not when I'm not thinking. So I just wanted to remind everyone, you want to fold here first. Then we're going to open that up. And this is where I like to use my clapper, my piece of wood that absorbs heat and helps this stay pressed nicely. Now I'm going to fold each of the raw edges into that first fold, and I'm going to press. But make sure you keep your iron only on this side. Don't get rid of that first seam. And then I'm just going to press that with the clapper, and then I'm going to bring in the other side. And then I'm going to fold it in half again. So this is the original fold line. And this is basically making our fabric that we're going to put our hook on, and it is getting those raw edges on the inside. You're just going to sew down each side of this tab to finish that. You don't have to worry about the ends because that will be inside the mini wallet. Now we have our lining and the front. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take the template and I'm going to put it on top of the lining. And instead of cutting these curves now, I'm just going to draw the curves on the corners, because you can just as easily sew from a line than from a cut edge. And this is just going to save us one extra cutting, because we're going to have to clip this curve when we're done. Now you'll notice if we're using directional fabric for the lining, the print needs to be going this way. This is pretty much non-directional, so it doesn't matter. This, however, matters a lot. And the reason that this one has the flowers on the inside is because I forgot to pay attention to the direction of the fabric. But this time I'm going to do it so that this can be on the outside. So when you're looking at the free templates that you can get, it's going to show you the exterior fabric needs to be this way. It feels weird to have it upside down when you're putting it together, but this is how it's going to be right side up when you fold that wallet together. I also made a placement template, and this is more for how to fold it once it's sewn together. But just look at the directions. You're going to put your D-ring clasp, and we're going to put a regular D-ring. So you put that through and you fold it in half. And you're going to put it 4 inches up from the bottom of the fabric before it is sewn together. So I'm just going to line this up on my grid. 1, 2, 3, 4. So the bottom of the fabric is going to be here. Now, you can choose which side you want this to be on. So if you want it to be on the left, you're going to pin this on the right-hand side. And if you want it to be on the right-hand side, you're going to pin it to the left-hand side. So let's do one that's on the right-hand side because somehow I got every other one on the left. I am going to clip that. You can either just clip it, or if you want to, you can baste that on before doing the rest. But to save time, I'm just going to clip it. We're going to put these together right sides together. And make sure, if you have directional fabric, it's facing down, away from the curve for the exterior. And I like to first do 2 pins towards the middle at the top and the bottom. I just want to keep it away from the seam allowance and where my presser foot is going to be, just so it stops it from shifting. Then I just like to use clips. Clip the top and then 2 on each side. One being this one, I'm just going to take that off and add that top layer. Now we're going to take it back to the sewing machine. Moving right along, we are going to sew around the 2 long edges and the curved top with a 1/4 inch seam. We're not going to sew the bottom at all. Make sure you go forward and back at the beginning and the end. I also like to use a smaller stitch than normal, a 2.0 to 2.2. That is going to help the curves be more rounded than if you use a longer stitch length. And then just sew slowly on the curve and try and move it as much as you can. If you're getting off of the 1/4 inch, you can always raise your presser foot and pivot it a little bit. Now that we have sewn along the 2 sides and the curve, I'm going to take these pins out. And then you need to clip the curves. Now, if you have pinking shears, and I highly recommend you get pinking shears because it's a lot faster, you can just cut right along the edge, close to the stitching, but make sure you don't cut any of the stitching. If you don't have pinking shears, you can do it with regular scissors, and I would recommend small ones. And then you're just going to do little snips along that edge. And then I would also cut it a little bit closer. Because basically what you're doing is you're giving the fabric a little bit of give so that when you turn it right side out, it can do that curve nicely. And when I'm using pinking shears, I always work over top of a trash can because it makes a bunch of fuzz that I don't feel like cleaning up. So that is clipped. Now I'm going to turn this right side out. Now, sometimes you'll see tutorials where people will say to just leave 2 to 3 inches of this bottom open. But when I am doing projects that have a pretty small opening like this, I just leave the whole bottom open because it makes it easier to turn and get this edge out. And I feel like I get a more consistent and straight edge when I turn the whole thing. So I've done this with my fingers first, and then I'm going to take this turning tool and I'm just going to very gently run it along the curve. You don't want it to push through and rip your stitching. Now we're going to get our ironing board back. So you want to have whichever side is going to be the exterior up when you do your pressing, so that if you want to get it as perfect as possible so that you're not seeing the other fabric on either side. But if you're seeing a teeny tiny bit on one side versus the other, you want it to show on the lining side rather than the exterior side. So just take your time and kind of push with your fingers to get this out. And then you're just going to press so that this is nice and flat. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to open this up and I'm going to start on the seam section. I'm going to fold each seam down 1/4 inch. And once you get that folded down, the rest pretty much falls in place. And if it ends up being a teeny bit more than 1/4 inch, that's totally fine. Just going to press that. Do that to get it nice and pressed. Now we want to sew close to the edge to close this opening. And that is going to be the top of our pocket. Because this is getting a little bit thick and we want to start really close to the end, sometimes your sewing machine has a hard time getting going. So what I use is called a leader fabric. So this is basically just folded over a few layers of fabric. So I'm going to put it right behind. I'm going to bump it up like that. I'm going to have it moved over from my wallet so that it is going to totally cover those feed dogs. This is going to help your sewing machine catch and move this fabric more easily. Then I am also going to do the old pull up the bobbin thread trick where I put the needle down while holding this thread, pull it to grab that bobbin thread, put them both under, and then I'm going to knot. My machine has an automatic knotter. If yours doesn't, you're just going to go forward a few stitches and then back while holding that thread. That is going to make it so you don't get a bird's nest in your sewing. Then we're just going to sew straight across and then either knot or go back and forth to catch your threads. Moving right along, now it is time to fold your wallet. Now, I want to show you how this directional fabric is going to work. So we wanted this to be on the outside, and you'll notice it looks upside down now. But when we turn it over and have the lining side up, and we fold this up, and then we fold this down, everything is going to be right side up. It will be upside down on the back, but it's going to be right side up on the front. You're going to mark about 2 3/4 inches up the side. Then I'm going to place my ruler here and I'm going to fold this up. Because I didn't do that totally straight, it's going to be fine. You just want to make sure that these edges are lined up perfectly. Now we are just going to press this bottom part. And now back to the sewing machine. I don't know what is wrong with me today. I keep forgetting to hit record. I think I do, but I don't. So let me just tell you what I did. We're sewing the pocket up. We're going to start on one end and then sew all the way around the curve and down, doubling back where the pocket overlaps for added security. And just sew slowly on these corners so that you get a nice curve. So you'll see that stitched all the way around the loop. So up the side, down the other side. Now we're going to fold that flap down and I'm just going to press top. And then it is going to be time to add our snap. So as I mentioned, I love these cam snaps. They're a family-owned business, so I like supporting that. And they come in lots of colors. And this is just the standard number 20. I got like a variety pack, so I have different colors to choose from. So let's take a look at our options. We could do brown, that kind of pulls from the sunflower color and gives a real fall feel. Or the gold, also pretty with the sunflower. Not a huge fan of that green. It's way too bright with the fabric, so we're going to say no to that. And then the other option that could be cute would be white. No, not in love with that either. I think I'm going to go with brown. Once you pick your color, you need 2 that are the pointy part. That's the outside. And then you need 1 male and 1 female piece. The male piece sticks out, the female piece goes in. Stop giggling. We're going to put the male piece here on the inside of the flap. So to get our placement correct, we're going to fold it in half. Make sure it's lined up down here as well as up here. Just kind of finger press that so you can see where that is. If you want to measure, you can. You want to go down about 1/2 inch. And then you're going to use the awl that comes with the set and make the hole in your fabric. Then you're going to push the pin through, push that fabric down, and then you're going to put the male side on there, and then put it in the tool and squeeze. To figure out exactly where the female section goes so that it snaps well, you're going to fold this down and you're going to press on that snap. That is going to make a slight indent of the male portion, this slight indented circle. And you're going to take the awl and you're going to push through the center. Make sure you're only going through this layer and not the whole wallet. Then the button side goes on the inside of your wallet, pokes through, and then you're going to put the female side. Now, when you're doing this, make sure you get that flat part seated really evenly in the black. And this is pretty evenly under the white part. And then you're just going to squeeze. And now we have our snap. So let's look at a few that I have made. I absolutely love these. These could be great stocking stuffers, a great little extra for teachers, put a little gift card or a little note in there. And as you see, you can put the hooks or the D-rings on the left or the right. And these are all made with my honeybees and flowers please fabric from Riley Blake Designs. You can see how choosing a different snap color makes a difference to how it looks. Also using the opposite, like using the lining fabric for the tab versus having the tab match, gives a little bit of a different look. So even though these are super simple and are basically made with 3 pieces of fabric, there's lots of ways to customize them to look however you want. I hope you love this idea. Be sure to subscribe to my channel for more tutorials, and also be sure to check out my membership where you can get lots of tutorials like this with no ads at all. So go to sewwithtarareed.com if you want more information about that. I am rolling out the red carpet so that you can try my membership Sew with Tara Reed for only $1 for 7 days. I want you to see how it is different from a lot of others that you may find. You don't just get 1 tutorial a month. You have access to everything that I've put in the membership from day 1. And of course, I'm always adding new things. These are easy to follow videos and written instructions, so the process is fun and not frustrating. The technique library means no more scrolling through videos trying to find that one little thing, no more wading through ad pop-ups. It's going to help you make things for the people you love, make things for new family members, make things for yourself, of course, make things to sew and sell. After losing both my father and mother to Alzheimer's and dementia, I was really relieved to hear that people who do activities like crafting, quilting, and sewing were found to be 45% less likely to develop mild cognitive impairment, which is on the way to dementia. It's also a great way to just tune out and focus on what you love. My name is Tara Reed. I am an artist and a fabric designer with Riley Blake Designs. And as one of my friends recently said, teaching is in my soul. I love to sew, I love to quilt, and I love to make easy to follow instructions for beginners and intermediate sewists and quilters. So I hope you give this a try, and let's have so much fun together.